First of all, back to my story from last evening in Singapore. I told this very story to the group I was teaching last night, and the person who asked me the question said, you know, it's really interesting because I had someone like that, and he was dampening morale, and he was killing the spirit of the team, and he was putting people down, and I was afraid to deal with it, and a year went by, and another year went by, and another year went by, and I finally dealt with it. And as soon as I dealt with it, the other employees came to me and they said, this is fantastic, and boss, why didn't you do it sooner? Hi, my name is John Stallworth, and I'm on a mission to encourage and strengthen men and women around the world who are committed to become as effective and as impactful as they possibly can at making the world better through their leadership. Last evening, I was training a group of leaders in Singapore through Zoom, and we were talking about Raise the Bar, one of the 5 actions of serving leadership, and what is required to move our organization into the place where we are leading according to our values. I shared with them that there is a gap between our say and our do. There's an old statement I've heard for many, many years that between the say and the do lies an ocean. And when that gap exists, there is a tremendous breach in trust in our organization. Our people don't trust us as leaders, and nobody trusts our organization. And through the values work we do inside Raise the Bar, we close that gap. And invariably, as I was sharing last evening, we bring up into the light situations where oftentimes key top performers have a gap in their own performance around values. And as I was sharing last evening, I noted that oftentimes we have to address that through firm measures, including through firing. And so I thought I would share with you in these few minutes what I have been teaching over many years about why and when and how we fire our top performers. Let me begin with a story. I was working with an executive in Singapore a number of years ago who had shared with me that she had implemented values-aligned disciplines from the Serving Leader Framework inside her organization. And it had been about a year and a half, and she had a key employee who continued to be an extreme violator of one of their central values, that value being respect. This employee treated the people around her like a bug, like an insect. And as I sat with this executive, she shared with me, you know, I coach this woman every month on how to behave according to their values and what it is that she's falling down on in terms of what's happening in her treatment of employees. And she said to me, John, I have made it absolutely clear over the last year that her behavior inside this organization is unacceptable to our culture. And I shared with her in response that she had actually not made it clear to that employee that that behavior was unacceptable. And the CEO said, what do you mean I have not made it clear? I said, you've just told me that you've been coaching her for a year and the behavior still exists and she is still employed. This employee, I said, knows full well that the behavior is acceptable. And I tell you that story because it brings into very stark relief a fact that when we make the decision to become values aligned, we often are led to need to draw a line that is very firm with employees that are not willing to embrace the values that we are espousing, or perhaps, and this is frequently the case, decide that they want to test us to see whether they in fact are more powerful than the standards that we have set. Let me begin by talking about why we would fire a top performer. I have watched in organization after organization that decides that they are going to bring their values right up to the front of their life. They're going to live by them. They're going to die by them. They're going to hold themselves to the values. And as I said a few minutes ago, the discovery is made that they're going to have to work with someone who is not in alignment with those values. And the reason it matters so much is that the morale that we are destroying when we don't live by our values, the loss of trust that we are allowing when we don't live by our values, the reputation that we convey out into the public and to our customers when we don't hold ourselves to our values is priceless. That price, that loss, that dampening of morale cannot possibly be exaggerated if we want to be a place that people trust. If we want to be a leader that people trust, then we need to say to everybody that this value is our value. Not just when we say it, but it's our value in terms of our behavior. And when we allow a top performer to violate the values and we look the other way, we send a direct and very powerful signal into our entire organization and out to our world that we don't mean what we say. Yes, we wish we had that value, but actually, push comes to shove, that top marketer, that top salesperson, that top strategist, that top engineer, actually we value them more. We expose ourselves as having a fundamental hypocrisy at the root of our organization. And then we pay the price for that in everything that we do. Why would we fire a top performer? We would do so because our values matter more than performance. Number two, when do we fire top performers because they are in violation of our values? This is trickier. Oftentimes when I work with owners or chiefs, they really get a passion for fixing the fact that their values have been window dressing. They know that it's been in the brochure, it's been stenciled, into the lobby of the building, but they haven't been living it out, and they get a real passion about fixing that. And so they take a few steps forward as leaders to make their enterprise values aligned, submissive to values. And then the very first thing they want to do is deal with whoever isn't living up to those values. And I say to those leaders, let's slow down. Here's the issue. When we decide to become more intentional around leading according to values, we must give our people the opportunity to catch up with us. It is not fair to our workers to walk in on Monday and say, I have been falling shy on leading our companies according to values. I've been looking the other way as I've observed things that are not in alignment. I've noticed, for example, that we say we value integrity, but we've gone ahead and declared some things in our reporting that wasn't true. Or I've said, people matter, but I've allowed some people to mistreat people. And I've done that because I didn't want to rock the boat here. But I'm turning over a new leaf here Monday morning. And so starting today, we're living by values. And by the way, George, you're fired. That's ridiculous. We must give time. And so on the question of when do we fire a top performer because they are a values violator, I put that on a continuum. If you are just beginning to live into what it means to be a highly values-aligned organization, you need to give your people a chance to catch up with you. Maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. Quite sincerely, maybe 9 months, maybe a year, because they need to come to, first of all, believe that it's true. If we weren't leading with that kind of clarity, we can't expect our people to believe us the first time we declare something. We need to give them a chance to learn what it means to live out the values. We need to give them a chance to improve in areas where they have been falling down, and we need to give them a chance to be guided by us in just what that looks like. And so if you're just starting in the journey of correcting that there has not been intentionality around leading by values, you need to give time and you need to purposefully walk them to a new place of understanding and conviction and realization and capacity to join you. Now, if you are an organization that has baked values alignment into the heart of your enterprise, you hire according to values, You screen new employees according to values. You manage people according to values. You promote people into leadership according to values. You do job performance with values alignment in mind. You talk about it in the hallway. You praise people at the Monday stand-up meetings. It is baked into the life of the company, and everybody around the organization gets it. If you are a mature organization in terms of values alignment, and you discover that you have hired someone who just isn't a fit with your values, you should deal with that within 30 days. That can be very quick. This is why we say hire slow, or as I prefer to say it, hire with great intentionality and clarity about what you're looking for, but fire fast, because you don't need a year to discover that that person is not part of the team from a values alignment standpoint. Question number 3, how do you fire a top performer who is not aligned with your values? I'll give you one more story. I worked with a hospital CEO some years ago who, when he stepped into his role, inherited a top doctor who was a tremendous values violator in the way he treated people. The prior CEO had not dealt with it, and so the new CEO knew he had to deal with it carefully. And so what he did on day one was he walked down the hall to where that top doctor was, and he said, first of all, I want you to know that we really value you. You are a tremendous asset to this hospital, and I want you to know how committed I am to your success. Secondly, I want you to know that the values that we hold as a hospital are going to matter from day one in my leadership of this hospital. We're no longer going to allow our values to be window dressing. What we say is going to be what we do. And third, I want to talk with you about the fact, and I know you know this, that there have been issues between you and the hospital historically on your own behavior with respect to these values. And he said, first of all, let me give you some illustrations. And so the new hospital CEO talked to the top doc about what the values were, about what those values meant in terms of the definition of them, about what those values looked like in terms of the behaviors. He described to this top doctor in very specific detail the values, the definitions of the values, and illustrations of those values behaved in terms of the hospital. Then what the new CEO did is he opened up that doctor's personnel file. He had done his homework, and he walked the doctor through about a half a dozen incident reports that had been sent into HR by various employees, which gave specific illustrations of what the doctor had done. And the CEO said, here's a situation where you did this, or you said this, or this happened, and this is how you responded. And I just want you to understand very clearly that that behavior, those words, that manner with which you dealt with that issue is not in alignment with these values. Why did the new CEO feel he needed to talk to a top doctor that specifically? Because he could not take it for granted that that doctor actually knew what he was looking for, and he wanted the doctor to understand. And then the CEO engaged the doctor in a conversation. Was he aware of this? Did he understand what he was saying to him? Did he have any thoughts or ideas about how these incidences occurred over time? And then he said to that doc, I've done a little research and I found 3 coaches, top coaches around the country who work with chiefs of medicine and significant personnel in large hospital systems as a coach. And I am ready to hire any one of those 3 coaches to coach you on this, and I'll pay the tab for that. The CEO then said to the doctor, I'm committed to you. I hope that you make the decision to stay at this hospital because we really believe in you. And then he gave the CEO a performance review process of 1 month and 3 months and 6 months with consequences. That's how we fire a top performer who is a values violator. Now, by the way, that's also how we correct the behavior of a top performer who is a values violator. Here's what I know. When you begin to be clearer about your values and you make them clear in their definition, and you make them clear in the kind of behavior you're intending by those values, and then you begin to talk about them in the hallway and at the stand-up meetings and in the huddles and in the truck as you're driving back and forth to jobs and so forth. When you get clear, and when you begin to address somebody who didn't understand, and you begin to lean in and describe to them what you really require in a way that you didn't do that before, and you put consequences behind that, all bets are off on what that person's going to do. I never know whether that person is going to correct their behavior or become stubborn in order to show you that they're more powerful. I started this video by saying that I was going to talk about why and when and how we, in serving leadership, fire top performers. But in fact, what I've been talking about the whole time is why and when and how we correct people who have a gap in their performance. There's an old saying that I have believed for many, many years, that when we find ourselves in a deep mess, in a deep problem, in a tangled conundrum, the way out is further in. And when we find ourselves staring at a top performer who we really value in our organization, but we have been looking the other way because they are violating our values and we don't know what to do, the way to get out of that problem is to lean in. Lean in. Here's what our values are. Let's talk about it. Here's what we mean by our values. Let me define it for you. Here's what those values look like. Let me illustrate that for you. Here's how you have been falling short. Let me be real clear about that. Here's what I'm going to do to help you learn not to do that and to help you learn to live out our values in your work. Let me coach you. Let me mentor you. Here's when our check-in times will be so that we have regular chances to see how's it going and to help you along the way. And here are the consequences, because I actually mean it. Nothing about your immense contribution to this organization is worth losing a company that lives out its values. The way out is further in. And I could never predict whether that person is going to say, you know what, I actually want to stay here. Come to think about it, I do want to be part of this. You know, I never looked at it clearly enough before, and I'm going to now. Or whether they say, you know what, I wonder if this person really understands how important I am. I'm going to take this occasion to show them my value because I'm not going to get on board with their commitment to values. By the way, the CEO of that hospital fired his top doc at the 6-month mark on the day because that doctor took the second course, choosing to throw his muscle around and show the new CEO who was boss. As I have been sharing over the course of these videos, it is imperative that we leaders get clear about how valuable our workers are when they are fully engaged, when they trust us, when they have a sense of meaning and purpose at work, when they make that decision to bring their full selves into alignment with us to serve the customers, the clients, the residents, the patients that we serve. We need to get clear about that because the value, the treasury of the human person fully aligned at work is beyond exaggeration. So my friend, the CEO of that hospital, fired his top superstar doc at the 6-month anniversary of the beginning of the journey, where he leaned in to try to help that doctor join the hospital that he was building. 2 things happened, and these things always happen. And for us bosses who are afraid to deal with an issue that's in front of us, we seldom factor these things. Number 1, morale grows. A lot of people have been hiding, ducking like turtles because of the behavior of the values violator, and they begin to stick their necks out and they begin to stand taller and they begin to bring more and they begin to look around and think, you know what, this is a good place to work, and their performance goes up, morale goes up, service to customer goes up. That began to happen at the hospital. And number two, within a day, that CEO began to get phone calls from superstar doctors around the country, and they called to say, I heard what you just did. Every sector we work in is a small world. And this superstar jerk was well known. And these other really tremendous high-value doctors called and they said, "Sir, I have a question. Are you going to run your hospital that way? I heard what you did." And the CEO said, "Yes, I am going to run my hospital this way." And then the doctors would say, "At my level of career, I'm getting too old for nonsense, and I would love to work in a hospital that lives out its values. Would you keep me in mind? I've always admired your hospital, but I was never going to work with that guy. And so if you're going to lead this way, please give me a call, because I'd love to work for you." When we face the conundrum of a superstar who is a poisoner to culture, we never look at the full balance sheet. We think, we can't lose all that talent, all that experience, all that knowledge, that expertise, that reputation. We can't lose that. We can't afford to lose that. Those sales, those customers. And we never factor the other side of the equation of what we will gain when we begin to move our organization into full values alignment. Well, I would love it if you would do me the favor of putting a like on this video. Please subscribe, share this with your world. It is our joy and pleasure to be an encouragement to you. And so until next week, I encourage you to lean in to those situations that are in front of you and allow your leadership to make a positive impact on the culture and on the people that you serve.